Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true firsthand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. If there is one thing I have learned from plant medicines and psychedelics alike, it's that what they allow us to realize and see is merely what is already possible within our lives. And, in my experience, the true work begins once we're back in our normal state of consciousness. All too often, we hear stories of individuals mistaking these medicines as quote-unquote necessary to enter these states, when, in reality, these states are already living within us. However, sometimes we forget or get stuck in a limiting program or pattern that can give the illusion that these states are not possible without psychedelics. Today's guest on the show is a man who has been able to successfully connect with these plants and substances as both teachers and medicines to be able to foster a higher quality of life for himself and truly buy the ticket and take the ride into making his life as a whole a psychedelic experience. From following his heart into a 17-year-long career as a firefighter, to leaving that career early to follow his heart into the next chapter of his life, which has been the process of becoming the program director of foundation training. He is a true testament to what can happen when we allow psychedelics to be the reminder of how much power we hold within us and take action on that realization. This episode is sure to inspire any and all of you who have had glimpses behind the veil on psychedelics into the magical potential your experience of life holds within it. And my intention for this episode is to show each of you that while these medicines can help you experience this, it is up to you to make the choices and decisions necessary to integrate these experiences into your day-to-day life to ensure you are able to have a relationship with these medicines and teachers that is co-creative and co-communicative in nature. So please help me in welcoming my man, Jessie Salas, to the show. Jessie, what's up, bro? So good to have you here.
Thank you, brother. I'm excited, man. I'm like, I got my ticket. I'm on the ride.
Yes,
this is gonna be fun. I got a lot of questions.
Yeah, man. I'm so pumped, man. And, you know, for everyone listening, Jessie and I were catching up before we hit record, and we ended up at a really cool spot that I want to jump right into, man, and just see where it takes it, because this is a great thread. And we were talking about the idea of presence and the idea of what, you know, medicines like cannabis, for instance, have done for us, right? And you were mentioning a story with regards to rock climbing. And I'd love if you could tell that story, and we'll pick it up right there, dude, because I think this is a great spot to get in, because one of the medicines that helps me the most in life is cannabis. And it's my go-to medicine when I'm looking to sit in ceremony with something, because cannabis, the idea of why I love it is that with other medicines, they're fantastic, but it takes me a lot more time. I have to carve out time in my life, and I also have to carve out higher amounts of integration time. And right now, everything in my life is firing me up so much that I don't really need a big experience at most times. I just need a quick little reminder sometimes, and that's what cannabis can provide. When I forget or get a little disoriented, or maybe I'm overworking a little bit, and I need to remember the effects and high quality relaxation that is so necessary to be able to be on so much. And so when you were mentioning the story, it really spoke to what cannabis does for me. And so I'd love if you could tell that story, man, of you rock climbing with your friend, and then what happened.
All right. So I got to start by letting anybody listening know my relationship with cannabis has been a love you. We broke up for a long time. We got back together. We tried to make things work. It was really awkward. And now I think we found a really nice place together.
Yes.
So the rock climbing was kind of one of those moments where, you know, as a firefighter, I had kind of stayed away from it for a while. And it was one of those where I would dabble, and I didn't like where it would take me. I would get I don't like where this is taking my brain, loss of control, that's a whole thing in and of itself. But
yeah,
this day I had an edible, and I was going to I'm going to go rock climbing. Okay, let me have one, whatever, it'll be chill. I'm there with my buddy. We get on the rock climbing wall. I was always the guy that when I would go to the rock climbing gym, I got to get to the top, and there was no thought involved. It was just, let me race to the top, and look at me, type A, I'm so strong. No one in the gym gave a shit, and all the good climbers were probably like, what an idiot. So I'm with my buddy who's a pretty good climber, And he's kind of giving me a breakdown because he'd actually gone on real rock climbing trips. So I was like, oh, explain to me some things, give me some tips. And about that time, the edible hits in. And I'm going, whoa, all right. Didn't plan for this, but I'm good. And started climbing. And, you know, I was saying with you earlier was that it was the first time where I felt like I wasn't just muscling my way to the top. It was the first time I actually felt like I was, the only way I could describe, my buddies laughing when I said this, is I felt like I was actually moving and doing a dance with the wall instead of just muscling my way to the top, letting go, going to the next one, and then, hey, I'm over this in 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. It was my typical ADD fashion of rock climbing. Cool, my forearms are burnt, I'm out of here, let's go. And now it was like a whole different experience. And so it made me step back and go, you got out of your head for a moment. That was really interesting. And it made me recognize, like, wow, you're type A competitive. You're not even thinking of anything other than get to the top. And that's it. So that was kind of like a light that popped in for a moment and then was gone, you know, and as I've gone now, it's come up more and more, a little bit more of an understanding of how can I use that to my benefit? You know, and I do it sometimes with surfing, with different things, but I'm very I don't want to say calculated, but I'm very mindful of when, I don't want to be like the Fockers, when using the pot.
Yes.
But when having cannabis, I'm not, you know, my buddy was laughing at me the other day because I was like, for the first time, I forced myself to do a wake and bake for a few days. And he's just, like, really? This is a big, you felt the need to tell me this?
Yeah.
And I just went, bro, for me, that's a lot because I've always been like, no. But I'm seeing, you know, kind of what we talked earlier, I'm seeing where it lets me get out of my head and have a little bit of sometimes creative flow in my morning moving and stretching, or even just a little bit more creative thought that I can journal around. Or once I'm done with my breath work, my moving and stretching at the start of my day, it was giving me a lot of this just kind of like different tracks of where my brain was going. And I felt like it was opening up creativity. So just trying to figure out the best ways that I can harness it. And that's why with you, I'm going, excellent. I've got a lot of questions, bro, because I've had a lot of these journeys of smoking. And like I said earlier, connecting the dots, looking back and going, holy shit, that was a life-changing moment, and seeing a pattern I didn't even realize I was living in, you know? So the rock climbing though, I mean, I want to hear your thoughts on all of that because, you know, again, like I used to joke, I was just a fireman and a reactive muscle that, you know, want to just see the challenge, meet it, hammer it into submission and move forward. Mm-hmm.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
So, thoughts, feelings, suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you know, what you said there about getting out of your head. So, you know, the really cool thing, if we break that down a little bit more, is you were able to have the realization that, whoa, I got out of my head there. But what was the first realization that you must have had in order to have that I was in my head? I'm in my head a lot, right? Because that experience showed you that there was something else available, right? Oh, I could be in my body, and that must mean I must be in my head most of the time, right? So just that information right there can allow you to dive so much deeper into your experience and start asking yourself as your own scientist, okay, now that I've had the experience of being out of my head, right, and in my body, I now know what the body feels like, and also I know what being in the head feels like now. So now you have this way to distinguish in your sober state of reality if you're living in either one, and which one is better for which situation. say, for instance, if you're a firefighter, you probably don't want to be in your body. You want to be in your head, right? You want to be like analytical. You want to be logical. You want to have reason. You want to be able to get from point A to point B fast, calculated, and everything, right? But if you're not in a dangerous situation and you're rock climbing and you're looking to get, like, what is the goal of rock climbing, right? It's to get more in touch with your body, to get to the top, but at the same time to have a relationship with fear, being able to have a relationship with being calm in the eye of the storm. That's a really good opportunity for you to be in your body, right? Because your body's going to tell you, hey, this muscle's getting fatigued. You might need to put weight on this muscle now, all of that stuff. But if you're in your head and trying to rush to the top, then you might miss one of those cues and then slip. And so not a big deal when you're harnessed in, but if you're ever looking to free climb or anything like that, you could get in some pretty crazy trouble, right? And as a side note, I have no idea how people free climb. That shit is insane. I mean, dude, there's this movie on Netflix called The Alpinist that is insane. Have you seen it before?
No.
Dude, watch that movie and I swear you'll have the sweatiest palms ever. Like, it's straight up the definition of sweaty palms. And so this guy that's in the movie, he was free climbing like just the most ridiculous things, dude, with no harness, no one around him. It's insane. It's crazy. And so, but the idea is that, like, with this idea of getting out of your head and your body, that's what I mean when I say that, like, I focus on cannabis, of course, in my work, but I'll say cannabis, plant medicines, etc. They can show you the what. The what was like, oh, I was living in my head and now in my body. But the how is up to you to be able to integrate. And that's what I said. The real work begins when we get back to our sober state of reality. And this is where patterns of dependency come from with these medicines, specifically cannabis, because it's the one that's most widely used daily, right? Mm-hmm. But people they start having this reward system dopamine hit of like, I feel better when I smoke cannabis. So therefore, or they intake cannabis. So therefore, the only equation, right? The answer for this is smoke more cannabis every day. Then their tolerance starts going up and their body starts relying on this thing to help them feel better. When in reality, they're missing the message. The message is that anything cannabis is showing you or any other plant medicine is something that's already able to be experienced within your life. But there might be something, like I was saying in there, preventing it, like a limiting program, pattern, belief system, etc. And so the real work begins with you figuring out, in your case, like, okay, I really enjoyed being in my body when I was rock climbing. So then maybe you go rock climbing sober and you realize, man, it's really hard to get in my body when I'm rock climbing. Okay, what's there? That's where then you could potentially even sit with cannabis and go, cannabis, I've had this challenge where I've noticed it's really hard for me to get into my body without without having you present. Can you please illuminate for me how I might be able to go about figuring that out? Give me a thread to follow, right? And so maybe then the plant shows you like some image of you doing yoga every night. And you're like, shit, yeah, yoga every night would be really cool. Maybe I'll start a new routine now where every night before I go to bed, I'm focusing on the intention of getting into my body. I'm sober and I'm doing yin yoga. And that's training me to be more in my body, what my body feels like, etc. And then that can start spilling over into rock climbing and these other things in which you want to be in your body in. So I love this conversation, man, because it's so fascinating and it's my obsession at this point.
Yeah. I think, with the getting in the body, I think it's a good way to put it is it turned up the ability to just kind of feel what was going on instead of just like, it's over. Like even in surfing, I feel like I was always like, no, I don't like that when I'm surfing. Mm-hmm. And some of my buddies would just burn hard and go into some crazy waves. And I'm going, nope. But I kind of just playing and I'm like, oh, wow, it got me out of this competitive mindset and just gave a different feel and flow. I'll see it sometimes, and I don't do it a lot because I get in my own head sometimes. Like I don't want to disrespect a teacher by showing up with it, but like I'll have a smoke and go to jujitsu. Mm-hmm. And again, for anybody listening, I'm not some high level guy. I'd say I'm the forever white belt, not by the philosophical, life is always white belt, but because I just have not been able to stay consistent. Mm-hmm. But I've done it for a long time, on and off over the years, and I notice sometimes even with that is there's more of a feeling and flowing with the partner instead of a muscling and forcing and trying to submit. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if it's just giving me a different perspective because my whole life had a twin brother and everything was a competition. And so maybe it's letting me look at things differently and come about it differently. But I've definitely had a ton of lessons and not always in the moment wanting them. Like I feel I feel like pot's given me the ability to be the cliche meme that you see now, where there's the two images, and one is the girl smiling. And it's like what most people think an awakening is. And then her crying in a mess. And it's like what an actual awakening is.
Yes.
And I feel like I've been the guy who marijuana has done that for me. And I'll give you the story where my buddy was staying in Hawaii, one of the docks. And, I'm out of the fire service at this point. I'm kind of a little bit more comfortable with marijuana. And he gives me an edible, and I was like, it's not heavy, right? It's minor. Like I'm sensitive. I don't like it a lot. Like for me, 2.5 milligrams, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
5, I'm going, ooh, okay. And most people are like, are you serious? So he gives me one. Oh no, it's like 2.5, maybe 5. I'm like, okay, I'm going to bed. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm laying on the floor. Yeah, I'm letting him sleep in my bed. I got a studio. I'm laying on the floor, and all of a sudden I'm going, oh shit. And I'm just laying there, and I start moving around. My brain starts running, and I'm talking, turning. I get up to use the bathroom, and I hear, yeah, I might have messed up, man. I'm sorry. And I go, what? He goes, yeah, it's hitting me hard. And I went, God, I just went, I'm never trusting you again.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is the thing. And so that for me was okay, now looking at it, it's like, these are the moments where I'm tossing and turning, my brain's running all over the place. I guess some people say it's like anxiety inducing.
Yep.
I look at it now and go, I used to joke with my brother, we hate it in the moment, but after the fact, it's like you learn so much about yourself. And as you were saying, I just hit a point now when that stuff goes on where I will do some breath work, but even that, like, I feel like sometimes that's an easy way to escape it, where rather than sitting there, where's my head going? What's coming up? And I'll journal, I'll write stuff down, and the next day review it and be like, okay, what do we need to integrate? Because I've becoming a fireman was, I had a moment of being super high. It's the first time I could trace back of, oh, wow, I was super high. I was in my head, and I was objectively looking at the situation I was in, how I was living. And that's what I tell people that marijuana does for me, because I hear about all the other psychedelics, and I'm very inexperienced compared to most. But when most people talk about other drugs, I'm going, well, shit, marijuana is the number one for me. I just need to push myself too far over my comfort edge, as I like to call my dark night of the soul. And I'm going to objectively clean the closet out. But I can look at these moments in my past and go, that objective observation of how you were living, the moment you were literally in and evaluating it, sitting in the backseat of this car with a bunch of dudes, you're higher than hell. And I just started going, how the hell did I end up here? How am I with this crew? Like, I remember coming to school, seeing these guys and being like, they're, for lack of a better term, these guys are fuck sticks. They're idiots. And here I am. They're my friends now. And I'm hanging out with them. And they weren't bad people. We were just very different. But here I am hanging out with them. And I just was like, I got to make a change. And my other group of friends, I had seen firefighting gear that day. And my buddy's like, I'm going to go to the academy our senior year, half a day of high school, half a day of fire academy. And I just remember sitting there going, like, I got to figure something out, or I'm going to wind up, working whatever kind of, like, I'm going to wind up working at this gas station for the rest of my life, because I don't know what I want to do. And every teacher, you're supposed to know what you want to do by the time you're a sophomore,
which is insane.
Yeah, man, it was absolutely nuts. And I just remember being so afraid of, I'm going to my senior year at 17 years old. I don't know what I want to do with my life. And now I'm with these guys. And I mean, I'll be straight up. Most of them are dead or in jail. But because of that moment with marijuana and being so damn high, and I had a great relationship then. High school, I was smoking pot, having fun, all was good. This was the first time it ever had this moment. And then soon after that, I was signed up for the academy. I was volunteering as a fireman. I was done with marijuana. For years, I didn't go back to it. But it wasn't until, I think, leaving the fire, so only last few years, I started to really make the correlation that moment of being super stoned, super objectively evaluating my life allowed me to make a major shift in my life that really shaped it, and allowed me to find something I was truly passionate about. And now I had a pathway in life, and so I say to people now is finding it as that tool, but the objective perspective, I think, is such a valuable piece of it. And I don't always want to go there. I'm that meme. Even now, like too much, I become the meme where I'm like, oh God, but I can evaluate. My twin just had that too recently, where he was like, I was a mess. He goes, but man, did I have some insight.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Like as twins, we have that same kind of experience, and he's more comfortable with it than I am, but he'll still have that kind of experience.
What is up, everybody? I hope you are all enjoying the show, and I wanted to stop by real quick and share a little bit about our latest podcast sponsor, Freedom Builders. Now, Freedom Builders are a team of graphic designers, website creators, videographers, social media marketing experts, and coaches that build out your custom online business from A to Z. This is a done-for-you service, which means they do the work for you, while you get to put your focus back on what you love most, which is coaching your clients and bringing in sales. Now, as a former online fitness coach, Mike knows where your struggle points are and exactly how to help you overcome them. This is why he created Freedom Builders, so that you can scale your business while protecting your time and your energy. Now, you guys know that delegation is a business superpower, and you can activate this superpower today by scheduling a complimentary call with Mike at freedombuilders.com, so you can start building the freedom that allows you to take your business to the next level. Alex and I recently connected with Freedom Builders for our Connect with Cannabis build out, and we could not have been happier with the results. With Mike and his team, they were able to go through an outline and create a personalized program for our experience, develop our brand identity, build and design a custom branded webpage, professionally edit our program video content, custom design all of our slide presentations, automate our email marketing sequences, create a seamless payment system for our offer, design unique infographics for our social media content, and guide us through our proven launch blueprint to generate organic leads through our social media. So if you're a coach, facilitator, or healer listening to this ad right now, and you are looking to put freedom back into your life, once again, go to freedombuilders.com and book your complimentary call today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the show, and I'm wishing you the best day ever. Oh, I mean, dude, I coach people on cannabis. I have a whole program with it, and I still experience anxiety, paranoia, and these types of things. But the difference is now I realize that the plant is only showing me things that are already within me. So when I'm experiencing paranoia or anxiety, I'm not, going to I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying, oh, what about this cannabis gave me that? And I'm more quick to go, okay, what's inside of me right now that needs looking and needs some attention? And so then I'll be able to see okay, yeah, you're overworking a lot right now and you're not giving yourself enough downtime. No wonder you're a little anxious, because part of you is your inner child essentially is going, when is this going to end? Is this going to end? That we can't go at this pace forever, right? Because that part of me is traumatized still from most of my life, going hard in the paint, going full throttle. I had a saying that I said for years, all gas, no brakes. And once I realized about language and how saying that over and over again to myself probably wasn't exactly enacting a high quality pattern with regards to what I was looking for, my core values for an experience of life. And so now I've been able to look at those things and go, okay, and those times actually allow me to look under the hood. It's almost like, say, if you have a race car, you love the times that you started and it works properly. But if it doesn't work properly, you're not like, fuck, everything's screwed up. You're like, all right, let me get in the garage and figure it out. Right. And so a lot of the figuring out that has to be done, or that gets to be done with cannabis and these other medicines, is actually more of a taking away of. And, one of the things I say always is that it's much easier to add things into your life than subtract, because especially as men, but women have this too 100%. We live in a world where you are based on what you do, not who you be. And doing is the addition, being is the subtraction. And so everywhere throughout life, you're being told, if you want to make it, you got to hustle, you got to grind, you got to do these things. And so the second you stop doing, something innately in you goes, what are you doing? You need to be doing more. You need to be doing more. And it's such a paradox, because what I've realized with the help of cannabis and these other medicines is that it's actually in the times where I go, okay, this weekend, I'm totally not working. I'm taking the whole weekend. I'm hanging out with Rachel. We're going to go play Can Jam with some friends, interact with some cannabis. It's those weekends that all of a sudden I go, whoa, I'm getting all these downloads for work. And oh my God, it's amazing. And now I figured out what I want to do for the next program. When that last week, I might have been waking up every day like, okay, let me see, like, where's the muse at? What am I going to make? And nothing's coming to me. So it's actually in taking away and being more and taking the pressure off of myself that naturally the white fluffy clouds that are all my thoughts start separating. The sun, aka my intuition, can come back through them. And then I just start getting downloads right from my heart. And so that's what cannabis helps me a lot with. I mean, it helps me with a lot of different things, but it helps me learn how to continue taking myself less seriously. It allows me to do my own inner work where I start being able to accept things about myself. Like, yep, I still have that pattern of overworking. Okay, cool. I'm not going to, get all upset about it or whatever, but something to keep track of. Right. And then my times without cannabis allow me to recognize where I'm getting it right. Like where I'm like, whoa, this thing that cannabis showed me 2 months ago, like I've integrated that. That's going really well. One of them for me is stopping work by 6:00 every night. Right. That was something that cannabis showed me, like, hey man, you can't go at this pace forever. Like you got to start doing that. And so I was able to integrate that really well over the winter. And now I'm in a session where it's spring, there's birthing happening and all this stuff, where now my energy is like, okay, I'm redoing Connect with Cannabis, which we're almost done with. It's an insane amount of work that we got done in a crazy short amount of time. And then we're also starting Grow with Cannabis. I'm going on a podcasting tour next week. I have 2 podcasts I'm doing myself. I'm going on 30 podcasts by the end of June. I set that challenge for myself. So there's a time period now where I consciously chose, okay, I'm going to work a little bit later than 6, knowing full well now that this is a phase in my life. And after this May trip, things are going to calm down a lot. And I'm going to stop working by 6 again for the next 2 months and really allow myself to like have my summer, mountain bike more, take an extra day off per week and balance that out. But now I know how to have an on and off switch. And so now I know, like, if there's a big push, okay, cool. I can tell my body, hey, we're going to go through that. I'll make sure that we're going to get glutathione bags. We're going to do everything I possibly can. Acupuncture every week. I'm going to supercharge the race car, right? I'm going to put the highest octane in it to wide open throttle it for a little while. But don't worry, we'll be going back to the garage after to figure it all out, rebuild the engine and everything and make sure everything's fine before we do another push like that. So it's so fascinating what these medicines can show you, because what I realized was that originally I thought, oh, being on this much is a problem. And it's like, no, it's actually a superpower. Like being on and doing what you love, that's great. But also, no matter how much you love something, you still need to rest. You still need to sleep. So if you really love these things, you will prioritize sleep and rest in your life. And so that was like the big aha moment of like, oh, nothing is inherently bad that I'm doing. It's just that I need to find a better balance to be able to continue doing this and make a marathon out of my life rather than a sprint. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And and what I'm curious too, bro, is when you're on those grinds, when you're doing that stuff, will you utilize, like, will you take and bring cannabis in as a tool to help, like, at the end of those days? I had a group where I was training with, and we were going hard, and the person I was leading, as we developed a friendship relationship, and I was being more open, I asked him, like, do you want, I'm going to have a little toke. Do you want some after like a 3-hour training session? We're going to train again in the afternoon. And they're like, no, I don't really like weed. I said, yeah, I know, I'm with you. But I found, like, one of the biggest issues with training is that, like, people start to overtrain, they don't recover. So for me, I just look at it as it's a great way to just one toke or two, knock my system down, let it relax, let it go into this, just kind of like downshift the gears, if you will. So I don't know, like, will you go in that sense and get calculated about that too?
Yes. And the analogy I'll use once again is the race car, right? To build a car that's going to win in the quarter-mile race, you might need to put a parachute on there, right? Because the brakes aren't enough. Now, logic would tell you, well, hey, if you're making the car too fast for the brakes to handle, then it's too fast. But if you want to win a race and you're really getting into a subset of racing where you need your car to be that fast, like a dragster, then in reality, you might need that parachute some days to be able to go at that pace. And so what I do is, if I know that I'm redlining, like, to a point where, like, I'm getting especially close to the end of when I'm redlining, if I'm aware enough of my body now that if my body goes, hey, it's a Monday, we're really a little anxious about this week, you got like 9 podcasts you're doing, this is a little much, right? Like, these things are, a little bit more than probably what you've handled before, new territory, things like that. Sometimes I will interact with cannabis on a weekday to allow myself to, like, initiate relaxation and immediately, like, start figuring out, like, okay, I scheduled, like, say last week, I had 9 podcasts I did, right? Between going on and doing my own. And so I had never done that before. The most I had done was 7 in the week. I was like, okay, this is new territory. I'm also at the same time, balancing out everything else I'm doing. And so I'm like, okay, this is a week in which I am going to use cannabis on a Monday, which I normally don't do because of my old pattern of using it unconsciously. But I've spent 3 years using it only on weekends to be able to be at the spot now where I trust myself fully. And I know that, okay, if I interact with this on a weekday, I've done enough now for 3 years to know that I'm not going to fall off the wagon. I'm not going to start smoking every day again and fall into that pattern because I'm far too conscious about it now. There's a certain, I wouldn't say guilt, but there's a certain awareness that comes to me when I'm looking for cannabis on, say, a Wednesday or Thursday, right? Instead of Friday, when I usually start interacting with cannabis in the week. And so, I'll ask myself, like, okay, is this me wanting to run from something that's scary? Or is this just my body being very upregulated and thinking like, okay, to make this sustainable right now, I might have to use cannabis on a weekday to ensure that I have my parachute, right? Make sure that I slow down. But then I know in the future, like, okay, maybe not 9 podcasts in a week, right? Unless I absolutely have to. If I'm going on vacation for a month and it's just like, I got to thug it out and get it done. Okay, cool. And I also know that I have my parachute if I need it. And so, yeah, I would definitely say that over the last 3 years of interacting with cannabis in a very different way than I had before, I've found what it's good for, what it can help me with, and also how to use it as not an SOS, but like if I know that I'm like, okay, I'm super upregulated, I'm going to work until 11 p.m. tonight, I need to be in bed by 11:30. Sometimes I'll interact with cannabis around 10, just take a couple puffs and then be able to downregulate enough that I go, okay, now I'm able to fall asleep very fast. I'm able to get high quality sleep. My REM sleep's not impaired because I used it, an hour and a half, 2 hours before bed, and I'm able to rest and recover because it's a huge part of it. I love seeing what my limits are. This is something I tell my business partner all the time because he'll be like, dude, are you sure? Like, this is a lot that you're doing. Is this like, okay? And I'm like, hey man, I love figuring out my limits because it's almost like, this is why I love exercise, because I like figuring out where my edges are, because then I know where they are. If you don't know where your edges are, well, it's really easy to break your body because you don't know what's going to break it. But if you consciously go to that point to discover like, okay, I'm not going to push it, but say if I get to 8 podcasts in a week and I am burnt, I'm just going to cancel the 9th one and just reschedule. I have no care to get that, goal of 9 podcasts beyond all measure, but I want to know what is the point at which things break down. That way, if I'm going on a month-long trip and I have 4 weeks to go, I go, okay, the most I can do is 6 or 7 podcasts per week. So that's as much as I can do and keep myself together. And so it helps me find my edges and be able to ride them and go a little outside of them without hurting myself as well. And that's one of the main things I've used it for as well, is to mitigate that.
Well, what I love is there's the cliche idea of the stoner, and then there's someone like you that's being uber productive. And I guess that was what popped in my mind was when you were going into being unconsciously smoking, that made you make that shift. Were you finding that you were, I guess, have you always been crazy, like go after productive, and then smoking too much? Did the unconsciousness put you into a state of like the stoner where you became unproductive, or is it just what does that mean? I'm curious because
this is a great question.
That cliche. That's what kept me from using it was, oh, you're going to become, you get lazy, you become this, yada, 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 you lay around. And there was a time I was like, yeah, it makes me dumber. Yeah. But as I found, like, it sounds you using it as a tool. So explain to me unconscious smoking, and is that the cliche stoner?
Yes.
So I can't see you being unproductive.
Yeah. So there's been different phases in my life, right? I would say when I was in college, I definitely had a little bit of that. I wouldn't say lazy stoner type thing, but really what it was why are people interacting with cannabis and becoming lazy, right? It's because they're in fear about their potential. That's what I found across many different clients. When they are smoking too much cannabis or interacting with too much cannabis, they're unconsciously doing it because then they can have a scapegoat and go, yeah, well, I would crush my life, but I just smoked too much weed. So instead of actually looking at the real problem, which is they're going to smoke weed because they're afraid to take action on their life. And this is why I say that cannabis doesn't make you anything. You make you who you are and how you are. With this situation, there was a time in my life where I was in college and unconsciously / pretty consciously too, I knew like, I like psychology, but I don't want to wear khakis the rest of my life. Like, this isn't exactly what I want to do. And so what do I do here? Like, I don't know what to do. So I would come home and I would get, my homework done or whatever. But as soon as I was done, I would interact with cannabis, play video games, and tune out because I didn't want to think about what does this mean? I'm spending $30,000 a year on something I'm not even going to use. Like that was just like scary to think about. But then what happened was I went to the Freedom Rally one year, which is the big, public display of disobedience where everyone comes out onto the Boston Common and they smoke cannabis and the cops don't bother you. And this is before it was legal and everything. And so I found this school that was teaching cannabis education. Well, when I found that school, all of a sudden, my problem, quote unquote, of laziness didn't exist anymore. I was still interacting with cannabis, but I was the first one in every day in the class. I was never late. I was the last one out. I would help them to their car every single night. I was volunteering there. I was interning. I was literally passing out cards on the commons for free about their class and everything like that. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, it's not that I don't have good work ethic. It's not that I'm lazy. It's that I wasn't actually finding something that was really beaming me up. And I was scared that I would never find it. And that's where I was using the cannabis. And I think this is where a lot of people are at. They're unconsciously thinking that they're in a situation that will never get better. And so instead of actually looking for ways to make it better, they're outsourcing their feelings of comfort onto the plant instead of providing it for themselves. Because here's the thing, action dispels fear, right? And so if you're in this situation like I was in, and instead of actually, luckily it worked out where I went to the commons, I followed my heart and I found the school. But at any point in time, I could have just came home and asked myself, okay, what is my dream? What do I want to do? What do I stand for? What do I want my life to be remembered? What is my legacy? What do I want people to say at my funeral? All of these types of things. And if I was able to think about those things, then at least I would start to get clear and say, oh, these aren't lining up with the school I'm in right now. So, all right, instead of thinking I want to be $120,000 in debt, go, hey, I spent $120,000 to figure out that I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. Great. Because I know when I figure out what I want to do, 120 grand will be nothing because I'll be doing what I love and people will want to pay for that. It's this kind of thing. And this is why I made Connect with Cannabis, because no one speaks about cannabis in these ways. A lot of times people only talk about the positive experiences with cannabis and other plant medicines. But I can tell you from personal experience, the experiences that I've gotten much more from are the ones where I've been terrified. The ones where like everything has fallen down and I've seen what's living within me in my subconscious, which is a lot of fear, anxiety, paranoia, etc. And I've realized that actually all of that is good too, because it's pushing me to take action and figure something out. And what I've realized now is that when I feel those things, it's not about getting it right or figuring out the exact right answer to the equation, but it's simply just trying. It's putting effort in and saying, okay, what about this? Nope, that didn't work. Okay, what about this? Nope, that didn't work. It's like how, Thomas Edison took 1,000 tries or something like that to figure out the light bulb. And someone said, wow, did you feel, really, demotivated about halfway through? And he goes, no, every time I found a new way it wouldn't work, I went, great, that's a new way. I don't have to try it again because now I know it won't work that way. And so I think that through the stages of my life, it went from that into, then I got into exercising and everything like that. And so then I was watching a lot of my friends that, I had been using cannabis with that were smoking, wake and baking and all these things. And for me, I just never liked wake and baking. I tried it so many times when I was younger. Yeah. It just never worked for me. Like cannabis and me, coffee. Yeah, exactly. Give me a coffee, give me a kratom. Like, I want to get going, and I won't say that, cannabis is never good for a wake and bake. Now I've started to realize that, like, say I'm on vacation with Rachel and we're in Martha's Vineyard and we got no work that day, right? So I wake up, I get my meditating and all my morning routine done. And then say we have a bike ride that we're going on, a 4-hour-long bike ride. Well, cool. I'm going to take a couple tokes and really get into my body and in my breath. And I'm going to go on that bike ride and really be in my body and feel what's coming up for me and really like try to only breathe out of my nose and like get really into it, And so in that kind of case, it's been really good. But I would watch, friends that, I don't know, maybe it worked for them. It didn't seem like it worked, but they would wake up and immediately just roll a blunt and start smoking. And I'm like, you haven't even had time to figure out like how you feel today yet or anything. And you're already numbing out. I think, and that doesn't do cannabis any justice too, because cannabis is like, hey man, why are you interacting with me? Like, what do you want here? And the ways that I tell people to understand cannabis is that number one, it's feminine medicine. So that means that if you don't give it the masculine component of an intention and therefore direction, then you're leaving it up to the plant to figure out where to go and to lead the dance. And so that's a really big challenge because I always use the salsa dancing analogy for this, where if you think about a salsa dance, the man and woman or whoever's playing those roles, the masculine and feminine role, have very important roles. The man's role, the masculine role in that is to give that woman the eyes that tell her, I got your back. I'm focused on you. I know exactly where you're going to go. Feel free to express yourself fully. And when you do your back bend, I know exactly where to put my hands so you don't crack your head on the ground, right? But at the end of the day, if that man like gets shaky and doesn't really show that woman the eyes, how well is she going to be able to express herself? because then she's going to have to think about like, okay, does he know where I'm going, and get into her head about all of that. And so that's what I say about cannabis, is that if you don't give it the direction, then it's like, well, I don't know where you want to go. So it just attaches on to whatever your thoughts are thinking. And that's where anxiety comes up, because a lot of times when you're numbing out with something like cannabis, your thoughts are in an anxious place and you're looking to forget. And so then cannabis gets attached onto those thoughts and then makes them, accentuates them and makes them more in the forefront. Yeah. And so when you understand that feminine medicine and your end of the bargain is giving it the direction and then surrendering into what comes up next, then you'll be more able to see it as the mirror that it is, which is, okay, whatever's coming up is something that was already within me, that cannabis is giving me the gift of illuminating for me. And then from there, once you're able to see it as feminine medicine and a mirror, you're able to access the third, and I think the most beautiful part of cannabis and how it works, which is it works as imagination medicine. Because then once you experience what's already in there and you take ownership for what the plant is showing you, then you can start going, okay, do I like this? And then you get to become sovereign being in it, where you actually start asking yourself, if I don't like this feeling, if I don't like this anxiety, then how do I move into this anxiety? And then once I start feeling it dissipate, imagine a new reality in which I'm not anxious. Because the first step to creating a new life is being able to imagine it. And this is how magic works, right? You have to imagine it before it happens. And then from imagination, you can have the direct experience of like, wow, I had this experience with cannabis or in a sober state of reality where I didn't have anxiety when I was in a social situation. I imagined that and now it came true. So then your belief system changes from I get anxious in social situations, for instance, to sometimes I get anxious in social situations. Then from there, you start having more experiences where you start getting less and less anxious in social situations. And then it goes from sometimes I don't get anxious in social situations to most of the time I'm not anxious in social situations. And then eventually it gets to I am perfectly content in social situations. So it's a stepping stone process, but it happens as you start shifting your beliefs, and that starts in imagination. Because from imagination, new belief systems can be made. And from belief systems, our experience of life can be had. And so I think throughout my life, I've started to realize this more and more. And the last phase of this that I went through really big was about 3 years ago in 2019, when I realized that even though I was doing all of the stuff, I was structured, I was only interacting with one bowl per night, I was still using it in the same way. I still didn't know the pattern I was using it for, which was to forget, to numb, etc. And so once I got out of that pattern, then I've been able to really start working with this medicine as a power couple. And that's why I love what you said, where you're like, we were together, we broke up for a while, all of this, because that's how I look at it. It's just like a romantic relationship. And because cannabis is such a powerful, powerful medicine, one of the things that I use it for is to start asking myself, like, okay, how is my relationship with cannabis? Am I overusing it? Am I in a power couple dynamic with it? Because from there, you can understand how your other relationships in your life might be playing out, especially with feminine components of your life. Like, for instance, I know that when I was interacting with cannabis unconsciously, I was dependent on it for feelings of comfort. So when I needed comfort, I would call my girlfriend and put my screaming baby on her and be like, give me validation that these thoughts I'm telling myself aren't real, right? Instead, and she would give me them, but then the next time I would just need it again, and I would need it again. The same way that every time I would feel like I was anxious, I would need cannabis, right? So you can learn a lot about your relationship styles and about your experience of life through what cannabis and your relationship with that plant is. And I would imagine it's the same with coffee, with nicotine, with anything, right? But to the degree that you're overusing something like a substance is the degree to which you're overusing other components of your life too, because how you do anything is how you do everything. And so it's fascinating to look into this. But, you know, I would never say that I was specifically lazy with cannabis. Put it this way, I would never say that I was like objectively lazy, but I definitely used cannabis as a excuse to be lazy sometimes. And that was really not the problem. The problem was not that I was using cannabis to become, lazy. It was that I wasn't having enough enjoyment and fulfillment in life. So therefore, I didn't see any other, option. And so I think a lot of times in society, we look at the result as the problem rather than the actual problem as the problem. Like I use this example a lot too. These phones, right? Technology. What do we hear about it? Oh, they're so addicting. They hijack your dopamine system, all of these things. Well, yeah. I mean, that's one way to look at it, right? And so what would be the opposite of that? Well, if I'm addicted to the phone, then I got to stop using the phone. But if you don't change anything about your life, then how well are you going to stop being able to use the phone? It's going to feel like a real struggle because here's this phone. You're in your normal life. It usually gives you some feeling of comfort. And now you're not able to use it because it's quote unquote bad. Versus what if you start having experiences where you go to a meetup with some friends, and all of a sudden you realize, holy fuck, I didn't even touch my phone for 7 hours. What the hell was that? I didn't even think about it. So is the real problem that technology is addicting? Is the real problem that cannabis is addicting? Or is the real problem that you're not finding enough enjoyment and fulfillment in life? And so therefore the actual problem is you got to figure out what fulfills you more. And once you figure out that, a lot of these things just naturally fall away. That's what I've experienced, And so I think that when we start looking at these things in that way with medicines and everything, because there's a big trend right now, like I was saying in the intro, where people are going back to back to back with ceremonies. I'm doing ayahuasca for the 4th time this month. And I'm like, guys, like, I'm not here to judge you, but I'm just here to say, like, what are you searching for? Like there's something you must be looking for in order to do that 4 times. Cause I know I have 1 or 2 big journeys a year. And even that, sometimes I'm like, hey, I'm still good from last year's. Like, I really don't need much now because I'm learning the lessons that these plants are teaching me to go out and figure out the quote unquote how. And once I'm in that how and I'm doing what I love in podcasting, I'm like, I don't know if I have time to like section out a week in my life. I don't need it right now because I'm still integrating what it's taught me. And once I get to a point where maybe I'm feeling a lack of fulfillment or something like that, I'll go into that with a specific intention of like, I'm feeling this way. Please show me what inside of me is preventing me from finding fulfillment. And a lot of those experiences are challenging, which is again why I go into them with a lot of reverence and I don't do them that often anymore. That's why cannabis is my main teacher, because it puts me just above the threshold where it doesn't have to be a full on 8 to 10 hour experience that I have to integrate for the next 4 weeks, but it can be something that just gives me one thought. Then I go, oh, I can run with this for the next week. And then I'm good. So that's how I use it now. And it's powerful, man. It's been a big transition.
It's rad because, one of the things when you're hitting on it's not the unconscious, wasn't so much the lazy, but like, I think that it's a common story of, when you're talking about being in school and worried about the khakis and the pathway that you're on and this profession. And I think it speaks volumes of, to me, what I see being relatable for most of the people I know that are discontent, and then they do use it as a way to just check out from what is now their life, and to like, I used to think it was just their way of, I'll say it, I'll own this, when I used to judge my other friends and their careers and I was a fireman, and I just would always be like, they're checking out because they're discontent. I didn't think much beyond that other than, your career sucks. You chose poorly, or you let somebody else choose for you. And I think that, the minute you went to this thing and found, wow, I'm really into this. Well, as you said, the pot didn't change, but what did change was you suddenly found something that you were inspired by.
Yeah.
And that you were like, I fucking am into this.
Yeah.
And you went after it. And so I think whenever I hear that, and I think of the friend out there that's got that path, or is that person that's disconnected, or is maybe listening to you or me and going like, fuck, but what do I do? And I always go, I'd love to hear your take on it too, but I tell people it's like, get super high and then go, if I had all the money in the world, or I had all the free time, what would I learn? Or maybe what did 15-year-old Jessie say he was going to one day be able to do? Or what interests you? What do you watch other people on Instagram and go, oh, they're so lucky, I wish I could do that? And then maybe make a list of these things and pick one of them. Like you mentioned salsa dancing. This year I was like, I'm finally going to really take in salsa dancing. I've always said, I want to fucking learn Spanish. I'm the world's worst Mexican. My dad speaks it, I don't. I started taking Spanish lessons. I started doing all these things. And part of it is influence from Art of Impossible. The other part is just from recognizing like so many things that I'm doing now that are part of my life and my career simply because I went, that looks cool, I'm going to do it. And I figured out free diving. I wanted to learn how to free dive. I've always been fascinated. So I figured out, I took a lesson and I started doing free diving. And I think it for that person out there that feels uninspired, it'll give you kind of like something to bring light into your life. And then, I don't know, figure out where the medicine falls in to help you unlock of like you did. I mean, you found this whole avenue and it took you there. I found firefighting and it took me down this road, but I think it's the analogy that I've heard used of, I think it's Buddhism, of the Walking Dead, where we're just going through life instead of having like you're saying with marijuana, feeling the experience. and I think that it nowadays, and what I love is how intentional you are, because there's so much of again, I'm going to go cliche because I come from one of those families where now my dad is slowly using, because doctors have recommended it, but the cliche of that's for losers. And that's going to throw people off. But, when they raked Michael Phelps, I'm going, you guys are destroying this guy for smoking a bong. Meanwhile, he accomplished in the Olympics something no other human ever has. And we're going to ridicule him because he was smoking pot, when reality, and I started, well, let's think about it. If he's training all the time, his life exists in the pool. He wakes up and he trains. Here's reality for a real athlete. He wakes up, he eats, everything's timed, he trains. He gets done training. He hopefully has relationships. He eats, he probably rests, relaxes, calms down, and then he trains again, and he's going to bed, and he's waking up, and he's repeating. They're the best athletes, and you hear it time and again, you have to be obsessed. Michael Jordan would talk about it. So when I look at that, I'm going, fuck, I would come off of a training session if it was me, and I would smoke, not go crazy, but calm my nervous system down right away, let myself chill out, have some laughs, eat some food, and prepare. But, using it, as you said, intentionally, and I think that's become the biggest thing that evolved for me, was recognizing that with intention, it does change anything. Instead of, for me, it was like, oh yeah, let's get stoned. And oh God, all these things are coming up. And as you're saying, like, not giving it this guidance. And so just by starting to frame it outside of just, oh, I'm going to have a tiny toke, calm down. But then I have the edible with my friends. I do these things. And I had to start to give myself permission that sometimes it's okay. This was me and mushrooms when I started kind of going down that road of like, hey, it's okay to just want to have a fun night. Like,
yes,
it doesn't have to be, you only get to use it to microdose and journal and take notes and evolve. That you're not going to become a fuck up because you're allowing yourself tonight with your friends to have these mushrooms and just chill out. And with that in mind, I'll give a very short story of, I'm in Georgia with my brother. It's only like the second or third time. Second or third time. No, I'm sorry. I've microdosed a handful of times. I've never gone like, oh, I'm going to have more than a microdose, with clear intent, clear plan. Because I was even like very on the fireman. Jessie was so like, no, with mushrooms. And like, oh, I don't want to go down that road, loss of control, all that stuff. But we're in Georgia. I've played with microdosing at this point, and my brother's like, yeah, let's, like, we're with a circle of his friends. We're going to go camping. We're camping. It's like, we're going to do a little bit more, like more than I've ever had. And I'm going, no. Well, you're really just like, you're just doing it now to get fucked up. What's the deal? And I finally went like, it's okay. It's okay to have a night. It's okay to just chill out and have the experience. And so did it. Beautiful. Like, we're down hanging by a waterfall, having time to myself, having clear thought, kind of really allowing myself to process some things from the years of firefighting. And we came back to the campsite as things kind of calmed down. And we're just sitting. I just remember we're sitting around talking and sharing stories and laughing. And everybody was just in this really nice place. And this kid comes over and is like, could you guys quiet down? It's 12:30 at night and we're trying to sleep. And I just remember being like, bro, I am so sorry. Like, and I could see him like, and they're like, bro, we're so sorry. Did not even realize what time it is. No worries, man. Yeah. And he's like, dude, thank you guys so much. And he walked back and we're like, hey, let's go to bed. The next morning, I'm sitting with my brother and we're all having coffee, and they took off early. And I said to him, I go, man, back in the firefighting days, we would have probably been that loud or louder. It would have been all alcohol. And that kid coming over would have been the biggest confrontation. It would have been something so much uglier, instead of us all laughing and going like, dude, that's our fault. No worries. I apologize. And that was that. And it just made me really look at like the difference of, one is socially okay and would have had an ugly result. And the other one is a little bit of like the taboo, but it gave me such a better experience. so much insight, so much time to grow. I mean, I had so many takeaways from that night. And then even evaluating that moment. And then even in a way, like we were kind of laughing, like, I wonder how long he was in his tent before he mustered up the courage to come over and say something. I felt bad about that, you know? And like, did he sit in his tent and go back and forth and debate? And yeah, like the fire service, I said to my brother, like, that would have been like, who the fuck are you? Know, it would have been an ugly confrontation. It would have been a lot of ego, a lot of dumb shit, which alcohol usually does, and it wouldn't have quieted down. So I'm just going, man, it's amazing what kind of shifts come out and what is accepted, what's unaccepted. And like, honestly, my inner battle of being like, it's okay. And then seeing like, this was so much better for me.
Yes. It's amazing, man. I mean, dude, what you just said perfectly was the ability to empathize with someone, to go, hey, we're having a great time, but I've also been that guy who's trying to sleep and might have a big day tomorrow. And there's people up having fun. And so like, you know, being like, hey, man, my bad, right? Take ownership. Like, didn't realize we were being loud. Totally cool. We'll fix the problem. And he's like, oh, thanks. And so like, you know, those kind of lessons allow us to move through life if we catch that message, to be able to move through life so beautifully. Because then if someone is, you know, frustrated or whatever, instead of being like, well, fuck that person, right? We might be able to go, and, you know, if I know that person well enough, go, hey, what's going on, man? Let's talk it out. Let's go take a walk. Or if you don't know them well enough, just be able to go, sending you love, you know, like from afar or whatever. I can see you're going through something right now, and I will hope the best for you, you know, wish the best for you. Because I think that we're so stuck into, as a society in general, I've been here too, in judging people like, oh, this clown came over and he's trying to make us stop having a good time and all these things. When in reality, he's not doing any of that. He's just trying to make sure that he can sleep and make sure that he has a good day the next day too. And then so being able to empathize and go, oh, I know what that's like. I've been there before. Yeah, no problem, man. I can do that for you. Absolutely. And, you know, I think you mentioned earlier, for people going through these things, like where to start, the first step is realizing that it's totally okay to be where you are, right? Like if you're right now interacting with cannabis in the way that we were talking about, that we don't interact with it anymore, it's totally okay to be there. You're not alone. There's no user manual for these plants. There's no user manual for life, right? Like unless you really get into like ancient texts and philosophies and yada, yada. But if you've yet to start understanding that stuff, the main thing that I've realized is that it's just about following your heart. And it seems easy, but it's simple. It's not easy, right? Because again, we're so stuck in the head. But if we can start really getting ourselves into a frame of mind where we go, if I had 8 minutes to live, what would I regret not having done? That's a good question to ask yourself, because all of a sudden the real shit will start coming out. You got 8 minutes. You can't fucking pussyfoot around with like, oh, you know, I wish that I had made more money. You're not going to care with 8 minutes to live, right? And so it really puts you in this container where you go, okay, you know, I really wanted to be more of service, right? I really wish that I had a romantic partner that I could share my life with. Cool. Now you know what you're really looking for in life. And now you have a series of things that you can look into, that if you decide to sit with cannabis or another medicine, or even go into meditation, sober, any of these things, you have questions to ask. And what I've found is that these plants, at least in my experience, they really want to help us. Like they really want to show us things, but they're also not afraid to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves if we're going into them non-intentionally, right? And it's not that intention is the right way and the other way is the wrong way. It's not about that. But it's just about, if you're looking to interact with these medicines to be able to foster a higher quality of life, it takes a certain amount of ownership and responsibility on your part to be able to make an intention and do your part of the equation. It's almost like if you want your partner to love you, but you're leaving dishes all over the house and then you want to have sex with them later, how attractive are you going to seem to them? Versus if you're able to keep the house clean and do your end of the responsibilities, your partner's probably going to find that really attractive, whether you're male or female. And so it's this kind of thing where the plants only will show you what you're ready to see. And so if you're not making an intention and you're not going into them with these types of ways, they're going to say, hey, it's not safe for us to really blow this person's mind right now, because I don't know if they're ready for it. And they might not come back from that. Now, at the same time, that's not to say that if someone decides to make a really challenging decision where they might not, maybe they're drunk and they decide to eat 5 grams of mushrooms or something, those mushrooms will not be light on you, right? Like it doesn't mean they won't still have an effect. It's a psychedelic, right? So, it doesn't mean that, you won't have a bad experience just because you didn't know what you were doing. They will check you. And I've had this happen, and I've had many clients I work with that have had that happen. With any medicine, it will. But it means that if you make the intention, at least like, okay, if I want to experience happiness, if I want to feel more connected to my friends, and then you go through a challenging experience, you can at least start to frame it in your mind, because your mind's not really clicked on when you're in the psychedelic state, but you can at least go, okay, my intention was to be happy. Maybe this is what's standing in the way of me being happy. And so it's easier for you to go, okay, I accept it. Let's move through it, rather than this shouldn't be happening. I should be experiencing something else. And that's why I'm so big of a proponent for intention. It's not just based on, hey, be able to communicate with the plant and all of that. That's extra. But the foundational level for it is really so that you won't have as big of a challenging experience. Or rather, I wouldn't even say you won't have a challenging experience, but you won't have a problem experience, right? Because language is big here. You might have a challenge, but a challenge is fun, right? Like a challenge is something you get to overcome. A problem is an ordeal, right? It's something that shouldn't be happening, that's now happening, and things should be different. All of these things, that's where people get really stuck in their minds in a psychedelic state that I've helped people through. And so with me, I speak about intention because I'm like, hey, listen, these medicines can do a lot more harm than good if you don't know what you're messing with. And at least if you go in with intention, you have some sort of anchor as to why you're doing this, why you're interacting with this medicine, and how to frame what the medicine shows you. And if you can do that, in my experience, you just have much less of a chance of having an ordeal. You might still have a challenge, but you'll be more able to come out of it and see it as happening for you rather than to you. And therefore, pick up the thread of being able to see that you create your own reality. And even though you experienced a challenge where maybe you felt like you couldn't breathe or whatever, you were able to move yourself through it and see it happening for you. And then you're like, whoa, I could have totally had a really big ordeal with that. But because I chose to interact with it in a certain way intentionally, remember my breath, be able to like sit through the feeling, I was able to come out of that and now talk about it and not having traumatized myself. Like that's the biggest thing that I speak about is harm reduction. I say all the time in every episode that these medicines are not for everyone. And for most people listening, I imagine they're in some way, shape, or form interested in this type of realm. But I say they're not for everyone. There's no award you get for how many ayahuasca sessions you have or how many mushrooms you eat. I think it's ridiculous that they call a certain dose of mushrooms the hero dose. I don't think there's anything heroic about doing psychedelics. I think it's simply just something that certain people feel called to and certain people don't. And it's one river that can lead you to the same sea that 80,000 other rivers can lead you to. Breath work, meditating, doing what you love, playing with animals. I mean, there's so many different ways to connect with who and what you truly are. Psychedelics are just one of the many ways to do that. And for certain people, that's their way. For me, it's one of my favorite ways. But I'm the first to tell people there's many other ways to get there. And so like, if anyone's listening who's like, I don't know if I'm really into that. Cool. Don't be into that. Be into something else, right? For you, it could be, this guy that was in the Alpinist, right? For him, he felt most alive and connected when he was like on death's doorstep climbing gigantic mountains. I wouldn't necessarily, I would never do that, but that was his way. There's many different, rivers that lead to the same sea. And I think the more that we realize that it's not about what we should do, it's just what calls to us, and then being able to be responsible and conscious so that you're safe in doing so,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's when I hear that, and I do think of that person that's like, I don't know about all this stuff, because I've been that guy, and I'm still that guy. Like I'm still that guy with a lot of different things. Like I haven't really ventured beyond cannabis and mushrooms, and even mushrooms. I'd still say like, I am the opposite of the guy that's doing the ayahuasca every other weekend stuff. And people that are curious, I hammer the book Stealing Fire, because that really hammers. And when I hear, because I've heard these different podcasts and of people that are going all the time and all, talking about how they overcame, they showed up for themselves. They did this, they did that. I'm going, man, but if you're doing it every other weekend, like, what are you integrating? Or it's like after reading Stealing Fire and the perspectives in there and looking at I hear it sometimes. I'm going, it almost sounds like you're addicted to just the sensation of being there, but you're never in it, and that's exactly, and that's always my thing for people that are like walking the cusp of their fear of playing there, is like, look at it as like, I think the big one is sitting down and again, of my big thing is like, where do I start? And I go back to like, ask yourself the one question: do I want to grow? Like, do I want to grow? Am I super into how I am, or do I want to grow? Do I want to evolve? It's a yes or no. It's not a right or wrong. It's a yes or no. Okay, cool. We'll say you went with box on the left. Yes, I want to grow. Then it's a matter of going, okay, what is it that you'd like to see shift, change, yada, yada, and write down a handful of things. Then bring in a medicine or go into breath work for a little while. And like, that's one of my biggest ones, I think is a massive tool for a day-to-day integration of these items, is utilizing breath work on a regular basis, utilizing a morning meditation, because it lets me hone in on all the insights that are popping up that may not immediately be present. But if I do that at the start of my day, they have a way of surfacing. And maybe when I go into my journal, I kind of go back and look at the last time that I had a little bit deeper dive and wrote a bunch of notes. But that the breath work, and I use that if I start to feel like, okay, hey, I'm going off the handles tonight and I'm like all over, I'm journaling, then I'll go into breath work. And I've had that just really hone in on areas of, why is your brain running with this? What is it about this that's bothering you so badly? Like, okay, hey, if this one thought is really coming up and it's giving you anxiety, let's spend a moment with it. What is it? Like, and I remember being like super stoned in the back of my van that I was living out of after leaving this professional career of being a fireman. And I'm in my van and I'm just going, have I made a mistake? What did I do? I went from being this guy, this established career on the best unit in the city, and I'm living out of my van, barely making money, but I'm having this experience, and it doesn't really bother me till I was high. So why is it now suddenly an issue? Why? And so it let me pinpoint this one thought, and it was really like, somehow I zeroed into just like death and loss. And then I spent in that going, well, I remember being like, you heard Alan Watts talk about meditating on death. Let's do it for a minute, and just spending time there and going processing some different fire department calls, but spending time with death, with loss. What is it about it? Is it your own? What is it about your own passing? Is one more way you're evolving? Is it losing your parents that are going to eventually go? What is it about that you need to accept or process? And just went down a rabbit hole that I never would have. And it came from just a little bit too much.
Yeah,
but
man.
A lot of questions. So I just like writing down, what is it you want to figure out or evolve, and being open to the idea.
Yes. Yeah, because when
that's why I go for you. Please fill me more.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, for me, like when I'm asking a question specifically that I know might bring up some challenge, or even like a really happy, positive intention of just like, I'm sharing space with someone I haven't shared space in a while. We're going to play Can Jam. I want to access my inner child and have fun. Right. So like, regardless of what I'm doing, when I'm in taking that medicine, I'm recognizing that I am surrendering into that medicine. Otherwise, there's no point to do it. Right. Like, there's literally no point to interact with medicine if you're not willing to surrender into that plant taking place in your body. Because every medicine and really everything I think that we interact with has a spirit of some sort, if it's natural anyway. And so, when we're interacting with that spirit, why would we be interacting with it if we wanted to have full control over our being, right? We're inviting that spirit in to have an interplay in our consciousness. And so I think that's where a lot of people get confused, is they go, well, hey, the same way that if you're talking to someone, they might bring something up that you weren't expecting them to bring up, right? In podcasting, right? Is sometimes people bring things up that I'm like, oh shit, I didn't think that was going to come up. And so then I have two options. Either I can try to fight it and be like, oh, what do I say here? Or I can just flow with it. And the more that you can flow with it and invite that feminine energy into your life, the more you can realize that there's a deeper part of you that's observing the entire game. And if you can get into that point of view, then whatever's going on in your mind or your body, et cetera, is something you get to curiously observe and go, that's interesting. I haven't felt that sensation before. Ooh, that's a deep pain in my stomach. I wonder what that's about, and you can be less attached to what it means and just experience it. And I think that's one of the things that, once again, the reason why I made Connect with Cannabis, because there's no one speaking about this stuff with regards to cannabis, and the people that are very few and far between. And so, I really wanted to be able to give people this user manual, because I think that, with these medicines gaining popularity very quickly, there's a lack of guidance. And I think there's a lot of people that are seeing them as cool or the in thing to do. And in reality, they're just something that, once again, it just is. It's not cool. It's not cool. It's just a thing. And if you choose to interact with it, awesome. But if you don't, awesome as well. And so I love that, man. And dude, as we're winding down here, I want to give people an opportunity to know where they can find you, where they can connect with you, where they can find out more about foundation training, man, because I could chat with you all day, man. And we're going to have to do a round 2 on this as well. But I want to make sure I give you time to tell the people where they can find you and connect with you.
Yeah, I always go back to easiest is going to be to banter and chat is my Instagram, Coach J Salas, Salas. And if it's foundation training related or like training related, then Jessie with an IE at foundationtraining.com. And we've chatted about it before, but that's where I feel these days utilizing cannabis has just been a door unlock of getting into my body and really sorting things out, especially in movement. And so movement, it's just kind of like a permission to explore, if you will, and having it going out in nature, walking, playing, and just letting go and getting involved with your surroundings. And I think it's sometimes it lets you tap into that inner monkey and crawl, climb, play, and get back to being more like a kid. And so foundation training, like Doc Goodman really talks about in his new book, Foundations of Health, of utilizing cannabis and really being able to turn up that volume of feeling and connecting with where a lot of injuries and pain might be coming from. So yes. Yeah, man, like that's a whole nother avenue, but I tell people it's definitely one of my biggest advocates now of within reason, but utilizing where it lets me kind of get out of my head, really get into the practice that I'm doing and meeting those moments of just like, in position, like this is so freaking hard. And kind of like, okay, where's your head going? Where are you feeling it? Oh, I feel like I can connect more with muscle and activity and connection of the body and find the imbalances better. So yeah, that turn up of the volume for feeling has just been amazing.
It's incredible, man. That's one of the main things I've noticed with cannabis too, is I'll interact with it and I'll be like, why are my muscles getting tighter? When in reality, it's not that they're getting tighter. I'm just more aware of them now. And then I can actually start following them and going, okay, so my neck is quote unquote tight. Where is it coming from? Oh, my head is slumping forward. If I suck it back, all of a sudden 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh, my neck doesn't hurt anymore. Being able to use cannabis to tap deeper into the body. I think this is why cannabis and yoga go hand in hand so much, because what is yoga?
Yeah.
For me, I don't like using cannabis when I strength train. Like trying to deadlift when you're high, just not fun, right? Yeah, just not fun.
I thought
like I don't want to be snatches and cleans with cannabis in my body. I want some maybe a little bit of caffeine, some B vitamins, etc. But when it comes to yoga or mountain biking or something like that, where I'm more in a flow state, that's where cannabis really helps a lot. And so my last question for you is this. If someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what is the one piece of advice that Jessie Salas would suggest to allow them to have the smoothest experience possible?
Journal, have a journal with you, have a breath tool in place that you can use to zero in if you feel like you're losing a quote unquote state of control, but also like hone in and then write down whatever craziness comes to your mind, good or bad, and close it up and look at it the next day and be curious about what you wrote, why.
I love that, man.
That's my thing, man. I love doing that.
Oh, I love that, man. Okay, guys. When I first met Jessie through a mutual friend of ours, Mr. Shaker, our energies clicked right away. We bonded over our mutual love for fitness, health, cannabis, and the role that cannabis and other medicines had played in our process of creating a life for ourselves that mimicked the magic we felt within these experiences. Jessie is a true testament to what can happen when we create a healthy relationship with these medicines and teachers and ensure we are doing our part to figure out the how to the corresponding what's that these medicines can show us with regards to our lives. For anyone listening who is curious about diving deeper into Jessie's work with foundation training, make sure you check out the show notes, where we will be listing all of the ways to get in touch with him and learn from his massive amount of wisdom surrounding the human mind, body, and spirit. Jessie, thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom on the show with us today, for being such an amazing example of what these medicines can do when connected with intentionally and responsibly. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.
Chee-hoo.